So welcome everyone, and thanks for joining to the call today. Hopefully today will be a long but productive session. I'm going to be talking about quite a few topics, and apologies if I brush across some of those very briefly, and not going to go into some of the technical aspects of the topics, but we can always go we can go into deeper discussions as needed. As most of you know, this is a session that we have been conducted at least once a week, usually on Sundays, and it's usually me or someone that is keen to talk and do a live session on Python. And it's been sponsored by Primera Resources and OpenSync Technology. Today, it's mainly me speaking about a few of the topics that I have gathered that I think are of the interest of the community. And those topics, going straight to the agenda, are a bit of a discussion of the OPM, Open Porous Media Simulator. Then we're going to go through the introduction of a norm reservoir simulation model. And we are going to apply some sensitivities to the model. I'm going to show you a bit of a high-level structural and stratigraphical sensitivity analysis or parametric study, however you may want to call it, on the simulation model. And for that, I will be using experimental design. We can have a discussion on when and why to use experimental design, and let's also discuss what are the strategies of experimental design in norm in the model. I'm going to parameterize also the original file of the simulation model using Python to generate multiple instances of the model. And then we're going to do some objective function calculation of few of the selected wells and few of the selected, let's say, observed data like production data and water cut. We're going to do a bit of introduction to machine learning with scikit-learn to perform linear regression. Whether time permits or not, we may go into decision trees and also compare a bit of both and how they perform. And optimization, I put maybe another day. It would be great to do optimization, and well, even before optimization, feature importance. Probably we can do that on the next session. So from the point of view of Python, what I would like to leave you, it's with few fundamentals on how to read and write on multiple files, how to replace strings in files, and generate the files subsequently. We're going to cover briefly objective functions, and I'm probably going to go magically into reading the simulation files and calculating objective functions. I'll say magically because I have covered this in previous sessions, so I'm not going to go deeply into what tools you can use and so on, but we can talk about it. Then I will use PyDOE 2, which is a library to generate experiments, and the usual pandas operations to concatenate, merge, and read and write data frames into CSV or Excels. And finally, scikit-learn for linear regression, and probably decision trees. And once we talk about decision trees, you can you're one step closer to moving to random forest, which is a quite robust approach, an ensemble technique. Fine. So let's talk about OPM. I hope some of you are familiar with the simulator. And let's talk about the purpose of a simulator. The OPM, it's an open source project. Briefly, I think I've talked about this before, or probably about REST Inside, but OPM is an open source numerical reservoir simulation that has quite a few features. And this is a web page, opmproject.org. Some of the attractive, the attractive side of OPM, it's that pretty much you are unrestricted to a number of licenses that you can run. It's up to you, up to the number of processors that you have and the complexity of your models. But obviously, there are few scenarios that are covered within OPM and few others that are not covered. The main thing about the capabilities of OPM are pretty much documented in the OPM flow manual, and it's quite comprehensive manual with the main characteristics of a simulator is that it's a fully input and output compatible to Eclipse format. And actually the manual, it's quite good and complete, and very similar to an Eclipse manual. So you can go through the manual straight away from their website. Now, more than letting you know about the existence of a simulator, I've always had the questions from a few people about how to install the simulator and how to get it up running. Especially, I think that most of you are running under a Windows environment. And there are a few things that you need to do. And you can see here that I have an icon, I can have a Linux icon here at the bottom. And most recently, Windows, Microsoft have gone through the strategy of providing a subsystem within Windows that provides you a Linux environment where you can do pretty much anything that you can do in a virtual machine or in a Linux machine environment. So you can download such systems from the App Store, from the Windows apps or the Microsoft App Store. If I look into Ubuntu, for instance, so if you go into the Microsoft Store, you can see that you have the Ubuntu option here. Usually, I think I'm using 18.04, which is the one that is compatible with OPM. It's completely free, and you can install it in your computer. Once you have that piece of OS installed, you also need to install something that it's a WSL, which is a command line to access the Windows subsystem Linux. And as you can see here, now that I have it installed, I can pretty much do the usual commands that I would be using in Linux. I'm completely on a Linux machine already here. And I'm going to show you a bit of what we can do with OPM. But first of all, once you have the Windows subsystem in your or the Linux subsystem in your Windows, then the next step is to go into the installation of OPM. As I mentioned, the supported environments are listed here, and you can use 18.04 version of Ubuntu to run OPM. So I have everything installed, as you can imagine. I'm not going to waste time on this session installing OPM, but you can follow within the project all the steps to install the simulator in your computer. And once you have run the simulator, there is a bit of documentation or tutorial here I think at the end probably, let me see here, on how to run your first simulation case. And pretty much a way to run, you can access the simulator once it's ready by executing the command flow, which is kind of the main executable for OPM. OPM as a simulator has quite a few features, and I believe that there are features for scaling, for generating streamlines, and I believe that those are beside of the flow, let's say, main functionality. But within flow, you can run a three-phase black oil simulation model with pretty much subsurface bottom hole pressure constraints, and even you can include some vertical flow performance or vertical lift performance tables and constrain your simulator, let's say, constrain the simulator performance up to the surface level. I'll show you a bit of one of the case studies. I believe there are some VLP tables almost at the network level at surface. I'm not quite sure what is actually working or not. I have performed some benchmarkings with OPM, and although you may see a lot of keywords in these cases, in my experience, some of those keywords are, let's say, there as placeholders, and some of those keywords may not actually do anything on the simulator. And I'll show you one example in the case that we're going to run, where we have tracers. And I'm not quite sure if tracers is actually run on the background with OPM, but someone can actually correct me if I'm wrong. But in my experience, you put a lot of keywords, and you really have to understand what has been implemented in the simulator and what is not implemented there. So the next thing that I would like to mention is, being an open source project, you can go into the GitHub repository, and all the source code, it's pretty much exposed there. And if you have a look at OPM Common, OPM simulators, they have ResInsight here, which I have briefly spoken in the past about ResInsight, and I'm going to use a bit of ResInsight today. But if you go into the repository, you can see that it's 90% C++ code. There are some Python. I'm not quite sure what's the Python, what's the level of Python that they have in there. So there are some probably, well, they have benchmarks and probably some utilities and not part of the functionality, the core functionality of a simulator. But apart from that, if you go into flow, it's the whole code, it's pretty much exposed, and you can see what's behind what's happening behind scenes. So if you're really interested, I'm not watching or following the simulator, but if you want to watch what's going on, you may receive an email every now and then indicating what is the progress with the simulator and with the development. Quite interesting to pick a few of the repositories that you like, and then watch how things are evolving in that repository. So that's it from the simulator point of view. I think let me see if there is something that I'm missing. Okay, data sets. So the data sets that are available are, if we go into the documentation, there are some, let me see, where are the data sets? Data sets here at the top. And they have in the OPM repository, they have, you can download or clone the repository. Yeah, thank you, Lo. Yes, Lo, we've been doing some, tracers are completely ignored by by OPM. Also, you may put the keywords, and you may think that it's doing something, but when you request a tracers, nothing is really happening. Thanks, Lo. So if we want to clone this repository, what I'm going to do is, just give me a second. I'm going to go into the folder session for today. And I particularly don't like to push into the GitHub repository, into our GitHub repository, where we do all these exercises in Python. I don't like to push the data because I don't know if there is any particular license associated to the data. I know that we can use it, and but I am not quite sure if I am particularly able to share it. So I'm going to do it in here, in the folder that I will upload soon. But you will have to do this step by yourself. So first of all, let me open up PowerShell here. And I'm going to clone that repository here. And we can probably start exploring some of the changes or some of the files that are in there. Let's see, just a second. There we go. There we go. So we have everything installed. We have Norm here, and there is a small presentation. I don't think that is super useful, but just have a look if you want to have a look at it. And there are quite a few cases that are installed. Norm, SP1, SP3, 5, 9, and a couple of models of SP10. So you can have a look and you can have a look at those. Thank you. Ankit mentions that the tracers functionality, it's at the moment under testing in the current release. That's very, very good information. Thank you, Ankit. Right, so that's pretty much it from the point of view of OPM.